What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain, and I'd like to welcome you to the 8th episode of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast. The feedback I have received in this endeavor from around the world has been awesome. A big shout out to Germany, as listeners from there have joined our podcast followers. I also want to thank all of you for your feedback on the two-part interview with Danny Cosby. It's been really incredible, and people have really been touched by Danny's testimony and Danny's song. If you have any ideas for future interviews, please let me know. Finally, a big shout out to JT for hosting the first online group in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm excited to be part of this new approach, using the A to D podcast as the topics for weekly groups on addiction and recovery. If you would like to start a group in your area or join an existing group, contact me by email at davidfroma2d@gmail.com or on Instagram at davidfroma2d. Today, we will discuss the difference between looking back and looking ahead in our recovery. The title of today's episode is The Man in the Mirror. I'd like to start today by asking you a couple of questions. When you look in the mirror, who is looking back at you? What do you see? Do you see an addict, a failure, a loner, someone who'll never make it, never be good enough? Are you still beating yourself up over your last relapse? Are you reflecting on your guilt about what you did? Or maybe your shame about what you did or didn't do? Addicts hundreds of times have said to me, "I'm so ashamed of the people I hurt in my addiction. The shame and the guilt is more than I can stand. I have to act out or use again to cope with the shame. I'm even afraid to look in the mirror." Well, if that's you, hopefully we can reach out and touch you with some of the inspiration from today's episode. And I'd like to start by quoting some of the words from Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror. "I'm going to make a change. For once in my life, it's going to feel real good. Going to make a difference, going to make it right. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change." Good words. Are you ready for once in your life to feel real good? Are you ready to make a difference? Are you ready to make it right? Can you look at yourself in the mirror and ask him to change his ways? Can you look at yourself and make a change? Remember that recovery is a journey. It's a journey that includes detours, potholes, flat tires, and broken down cars. Too often, when we relapse, we hear condemnation from friends and families. They say things like, "I knew you wouldn't make it. You never keep your promises. You'll always be a junkie. You must go to rehab for a year. Back to phase 1, step 1, day 1. Your clean time is back to 0. But I want to challenge that logic. No one driving from New York to Los Angeles would go back to New York if the car broke down and start all over again. We would get the car repaired right there and continue on the journey. As you look in the mirror on your journey of recovery, I want to encourage every one of you to see the reflection of how strong you are now as the result of the changes, as a result of the transformation taking place inside of you. You have been learning from past mistakes. You have grown. You are not the man or woman you used to be. Do you see the growth? Do you look ahead with hope and confidence? I heard an anonymous quote once that says, "When I look back on my life, I can see the pain, the mistakes, and the heartache. When I look in the mirror, I see strength, lessons learned, and pride in myself." Are you ready to stop dwelling on the past, to let go of the pain, the mistakes, and the heartache? Look at yourself in the mirror and say and tell him, "In my addiction, I didn't do anything worse than millions of other addicts had done before." Some of you may be thinking, this all sounds good, but how do I put it all together? How do I really make it work for me? I'm going to give you some quotes from a variety of people who've been in your shoes, a variety of people who've tried to figure out, how do I look in the mirror and not see the past? How do I look in the mirror and not be riddled with guilt and shame? How do I look in the mirror and not lose hope on my future? How can I simply look in the mirror and see me and see the growth that's taking place? As you listen to these variety of quotes, one or more may jump out and speak directly to you. If so, I urge you to take note of that one. I urge you to replay this podcast and maybe write that one down. The first quote is from Yoko Ono, the wife of John Lennon of the Beatles. And she said, "Look at yourself in the mirror and don't be afraid to notice how beautiful you are." Are you ready to do that? Can you see your beauty in the mirror, or do you always see your flaws? Yoko Ono went on to explain further, and I quote, "Be kind to yourself this evening. Buy something for yourself. Treat yourself to a meal. Look in the mirror and give yourself a smile." And I want to ask you, do you celebrate your steps of growth? Do you celebrate by buying yourself, treating yourself, smiling at yourself, and say, "I'm making progress"? The next quote is from world-famous Spanish painter Pablo Picasso. And it touched on the fact that we need to look deeply, we need to look inside, we need to look at the soul. And he did this when he asked, who sees the human face correctly? The photographer, the mirror, or the painter? I ask you, when you look in the mirror, can you look inside and see with the creative eye like a photographer or a painter? The next quote is from television personality Jonathan Van Ness. He said, "I had to fight a lot of years to be really proud of the person I see in the mirror, and I really love this person." So I ask you, what is keeping you from being proud of the person you see in the mirror? What is keeping you from loving yourself? Are you ready to start taking the steps to be proud of the person you see in the mirror? Model and television personality Tyra Banks said, "Stop saying these negative things about yourself. Look in the mirror and find something about yourself that's positive and celebrate that." Are you one of the people who keeps speaking negative things about yourself? You've heard so many people speak negative things about your past that you just describe yourself that way? Well, it's time to find something about yourself that's positive and celebrate that. Golden Globe award-winning actress Drew Barrymore said, "I used to look in the mirror and feel shame. I look in the mirror now and I absolutely love myself." Whew. I wish that and pray that for each of you who are listening today. No longer see the shame, but be able to absolutely love yourself. Grammy-winning rapper and actress Queen Latifah said, "When I was around 18, I looked in the mirror and said, 'You're either going to love yourself or hate yourself.' And I decided to love myself. That changed a lot of things." So for those of you who listened to what Drew Barrymore said just before this, it starts with the decision. Are you going to love yourself or hate yourself? Decide today to love yourself and see what changes happen. Finally, there's great wisdom in the book of James, chapter 1, verses 22 to 24. It reads, "But don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. For if you listen to the word and don't obey it, it is like glancing at your face in the mirror. You see yourself, walk away, and forget what you look like." I challenge you, when you begin to look at yourself in the mirror, don't just glance and walk away. Look carefully, look deeply, and be encouraged to continue in your walk of recovery. In closing, here's your Man in the Mirror challenge to help you to look deeply. Write down 5 positive things about yourself. Put each one on a separate sticky note or post-it note. Stick them on your mirror to remind yourself every day, several times a day, of how far you have come on this journey of recovery, how much you have changed, and how much better you are today. Thanks for listening. Please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast link with 2 or 3 people this week. Keep sending your feedback, and if you would like to be part of a weekly Zoom meeting on addiction or recovery, contact me by email at davidfromatod@gmail.com or by Instagram at davidfromatod. Tune in next week for the next episode of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast.